welcome to this brand new episode of Dil Se with Kapil Sibal. I'm Nidhi Razdan. And today we're going to talk about something that's really important, but I think many of us don't quite understand how important it is. And that's the issue of election funding. A 5-judge constitution bench of the Supreme Court has just reserved its verdict in a case on what are called electoral bonds. You may ask, what are electoral bonds? Essentially, this was a scheme that was introduced in 2017 through an act of parliament which allows individuals and companies to buy these money instruments from the State Bank of India during specified times of the year through which they can donate to political parties. But the catch is that the donor's name and the donor's details remain completely anonymous, except probably to those who want to know, such as, of course, the bank and perhaps even the government. It is the State Bank of India after all. But political parties and you and I as voters don't know how parties are actually being funded. The biggest problem also is that only one political party has actually gained from this system of anonymous donations, and that has been the BJP. So it's not really been a level playing field. Well, let's take this straight across to Mr. Sibal, who is actually one of the senior lawyers who also argued in this case. First of all, Mr. Sibal, this case was pending before the Supreme Court for more than 3 years. We were waiting for it to be heard because a number of people petitioned the court saying that this is an opaque scheme, its anonymity, completely lacks transparency, etc. When it was finally heard, and now that it's over, it actually finished in 3 days. How did you feel, walking away from that? Because the court did make some pretty strong observations in the course of the hearing. Talking about serious deficiencies in the scheme?
Well, first of all, this is the first time that I am actually giving an interview in respect to a matter in which I have argued. I normally don't do that. So that's something I want to tell the public, that I was a counsel in the case. So, and yet I believe that this is such an important matter that I need to put the facts before the country. First of all, you must understand how this electoral bond scheme came into force. This happened through the Finance Act, not through a normal parliamentary legislation.
A money bill.
Through a money bill. And what happened was they amended several acts. Number one, they amended the Representation of Peoples Act. Why did they amend? Because under the previous law, any donation above 20,000 rupees, the source of it had to be disclosed. So they amended it saying if you buy an electoral bond, which you can buy in January, in April, in July, in October, and you must buy it within 10 days of the authorization, and you must actually give the money within 15 days, after which the door is closed. So they had to amend the Representation of Peoples Act. Number one, they had to amend the Reserve Bank of India in the Act. For Reserve Bank of India deals with authorizing bonds of this nature. So the Reserve Bank of India Act was amended, and this responsibility was given to the State Bank of India. Then they amended the Income Tax Act. They amended the Income Tax Act because any donation made, there is an income tax exemption, right? And over and above that, they amended yet another law.
The Companies Act.
The Companies Act, by which any company can donate any amount. Now, previously, under the previous law, a company could only donate up to 7.5% of the earnings of the company in the last 3 years, not more than that. That limit was taken away. So any company can now donate unlimited amounts, whether it's making money or it's at a loss.
Yeah.
Right? So
that's an important point.
Yeah. So it can now.
So shell companies can be set up, for example, which is actually completely opposite to the transparency that the government said it sought.
For the moment, let's forget transparency. This, according to me, and this is perhaps the biggest scam in the history of this country, the whole purpose of the scheme is to enrich the BJP. And I tell you why. See, every party needs cash and it needs white money to conduct their expenses. Now, when it comes to cash, there is a limit for a candidate who fights an election up to 95 lakhs. He can't spend more than that. So these electoral bonds, which is white money, can't be spent by a candidate because his limit is only 95 lakhs. So none of these bonds go for the election. So therefore, the very name electoral bonds is a misnomer. It has nothing to do with the elections.
You mean it goes to the party?
Yeah, so that's the point I was coming to. So therefore, it doesn't go to the candidate. The black money, which is the reason they say that we want to reduce black money, as you know, has nothing to do with the electoral bonds because that's white money. So in any election you go to, everybody spends much more than 95 lakhs. In fact, in some constituencies, it's 200, 300 crores. Right? So the black money is rampant. So the reason for the bonds that will reduce black money is not there. So now where do these bonds go? These bonds go to the political party. Which political party? And by the corporate sector. In other words, the corporate sector will give it to who? Whichever party is ruling, either in the center or in the state. Because whichever party is ruling, corporate sector wants favors, right?
Yeah, obviously.
Obviously.
Yeah.
So over the years, that is 2017 onwards, the maximum money, more than 60%, has gone to the BJP. In fact, much more than 60%.
Much more than that, yeah.
Right? Has gone to the BJP. That's in thousands of crores. With that money, they have built their offices all over the country. With that money, they have set up these trolling armies. With that money, they have set up perhaps RSS offices. Nobody knows. So that money is in their coffer. That money can be used for anything because the expenses are not regulated. And since it is not used for the election, it can't be used for the election, it is for their internal empowerment. So that is why the BJP is perhaps the richest party in this country. The whole scheme was to fund the BJP.
You know, there are many aspects of this electoral bond scheme that I'd like to talk about, also talk to you about, alternatives and election funding as a whole. But in this particular matter, what I found astonishing was when the Attorney General told the Supreme Court that actually citizens don't have a general right to know who is funding political parties. As a voter, I was surprised that was the stand the government took.
No, they do even under the present law.
So this was misleading.
It's misleading. Why? Because if you donate above 20,000 rupees, not through electoral bonds, the public has a right to know. See the anomaly. If you donate something through electoral bonds, which can be 1,000 rupees, 10,000 rupees.
Up to a crore.
Up to a crore rupees maximum, right? So you can do it through electoral bonds and the public will not know.
Right.
But if you don't do it through an electoral bond, the public has a right to know because anything above 20,000 rupees
has to be declared.
Has to be declared. So what's the logic for that? The whole purpose is when you are funding a political party, and the BJP knows that all this money will come to them. That's how they are controlling the elections in this country.
The argument that the government seemed to make was that in this case, anonymity is important because parties that do not get donations, let's say from certain corporates, will therefore, in a sense, what they were trying to say is that there will be no sort of vengeance against those who did not donate to them. I mean, this seemed to be the argument that they gave.
This also has no basis at all because every big corporate house funds all political parties.
Exactly.
Right? They will fund
It depends how much.
Yeah. In the state, they will fund them more. But in the center, they will fund the BJP. But that corporate house would have actually funded the state also. So who will they complain to? If you say, like, I'll take vengeance against you, but you are the ones who have received this money. And this whole concept of anonymity is all bogus for the simple reason that a person who donates will tell the party that I have donated.
They'll want to tell them.
Naturally, because that's the quid pro quo.
It's not difficult for the party at the center in any case to know who donated.
In any case, why would a person donate with anonymity? Because if he has donated a crore or 5 crores or 10 crores or 20 crores.
He wants a favor or whatever.
Whatever it, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, it goes without saying that the whole purpose of a donation is to take favors, right? Now, how are these favors taken? Many ways these favors are taken. But let me tell you the really serious nexus involved here. The party donates. The corporate sector donates to the party. The corporate sector controls the media, right? All the big corporate houses have their mainstream media channels. So they donate the party. The party then gives advertisements to those channels so that money is is funneled through. And then that channel propagates the ideology of the BJP.
Which pretty much every channel does today.
Which is therefore a very serious nexus. And this is, people in this country don't even know about it.
So what you're saying is that I remember when Arun Jaitley was the finance minister, these laws, the laws were amended, all these laws that you cited, and it was very controversially brought in as a money bill, as you said. In fact, that is also up before the Supreme Court, that
Yes,
question of whether that was the right thing to do. But his argument repeatedly at that time was, well, this is the best possible system that we can have today to curb black money, and those who are complaining about it are not giving us an alternative, as in what is a better way to fund
I
elections than this?
demonstrate to you has nothing to do with black money. Because
Exactly. So what you're saying is that it's actually not stemmed that problem of cash in
it
elections
has
at all.
nothing to do with it because it's white money. Nobody is going to convert white money into black. This is white money being donated through electoral bonds, if it's genuinely white money. But it can also happen, as you said, there are shell companies. How do you know that this money is white money at all? Right?
No, you don't know that. Exactly.
You don't. Nobody.
Earlier, at least you had some
unless
cap.
Unless you investigate it, how will you know? But I'll assume for the moment that it is white money. Then it is not curbing black money. And if it is black money, then there's no point in having the scheme.
Weren't the laws also amended in a way that even foreigners can now contribute to political parties, and we will not know about
What
it?
happened was under the old FCRA, Foreign Contribution Act, what used to happen is a foreign company could not contribute. But now they amended that law as well, saying that a foreign company which has an Indian subsidiary can contribute. So you can get actually foreign funding. So many of these corporate houses that are located abroad, and we know some of them, has actually funded their subsidiaries, and that's the money that went through. And then you don't even know. You see, I may buy 10 bonds worth 1 crore each, so 10 crores. Now, if I want to contribute, I don't have to buy the bond myself. I can give that person 10 crores in cash, get that bond, and give it to the party. And that party will never know who originally took the bonds for 10 crores. Never know. And I take the credit.
You know, I want to state on record here, it's important to say here as well that the Election Commission of India has also described the electoral bond scheme over the years as one that is completely non-transparent and opaque. I don't know what they've said lately because the Election Commission's character, as it were, has changed a little bit in the last couple of years, but I remember they did oppose it strongly back then. But looking at the larger issue of election funding, is the problem that we have unrealistic limits on what candidates and parties can actually spend in our elections?
Well, let me first talk about the Election Commission. The Election Commission opposed it in writing, but when it came to court, it never said anything.
That's now,
right?
imagine.
Number one. Number two, the Reserve Bank of India opposed it.
Yes, they had, yes.
Right? Both opposed it. And yet the scheme went through because this was an ideal strategy devised by the then finance minister to enrich the BJP, and he succeeded it. Now, if you get this kind of money in your coffers, how will any party complete? In fact, it's the subversion of democracy. Remember, 324 of the Constitution, Article 324, talks about free and fair elections. With this kind of money, the election can neither be free nor it can be fair. So it is a complete subversion of our electoral
It's
system.
not a level playing field, as you say, and also voters, we don't know
where
the money is coming from.
It's not free because you are in fact amassing wealth and through the corporate sector propagating your ideology to the people by giving them advertisements and enriching them, which comes back to you.
So coming back to the issue of spending limits, are these just sort of utopian?
No limits that you put will stop black money. Remember, the black money in the system, or the cash in the system today, it was 18 lakh crores earlier. Today it's 34 lakh crores.
Yeah, of course. The cash is back and how?
And the percentage of cash to GDP remains the same.
Yeah.
So therefore, there is no reduction of cash.
No, but then are you saying there is no way to end or reduce the influence of black money?
Of course you can. That depends on how you do it. For example, you take the corporate funding, you take the electoral bonds, right? Whatever the total amount is, say it's 500 crores or 1,000 crores or 5,000 crores. Now you know the representation of parties in parliament. Divide these electoral bonds in the ratio in which they are represented. So everybody gets a level playing field. Right? So if it's 300 people for the BJP, 300 people will get out of that. Everybody will get the same amount. Right?
And it'll be a fairer
And it will
system.
be fairer system. And the electoral bonds can be used for the election, not for funding, not for enriching a political party. Simple. The Election Commission can devise a scheme.
When you look at, let's say, election funding in other countries, the US, for example, what do you think of their systems?
Many of the countries actually prohibit corporate funding directly. Why? Because there's an obvious quid pro quo. I mean, it's as simple as that. People who will fund you will come to you for favors, whether they want a contract. And remember, there's another issue, a very serious issue. What happens in these government contracts, if the rate is fixed as X, the government will, or the person will say, fix it at X plus. The plus you give us and the X you take. Right? And the plus you give us through the electoral bonds. You get the point? So the government gives him more money than he deserves. The cushion that's given by the government to him, to that contractor, becomes the source for electoral bonds, giving it back to the government and enriching the party. So you give public offers to enrich the party.
So, what would you say? I mean, you did make a concrete suggestion in sort of proportionally dividing money through electoral bonds among different political parties. But is there anything else that we can do? For example, one of the ideas that's been mooted for decades now has been state funding of elections. Is that realistic? Is that something that can be done?
The state can fund, but the process, of course, has to be proportionate then. There's no other way to fund. If you want
it has to be proportionate. Yeah,
correct.
Yeah.
But then black money will still continue, because it's these are such expensive elections. In fact, in places like Karnataka and many, I don't want to actually name a state. In many states, the kind of expenses are mind-boggling.
No, it's not. It's many states.
Forget about the states. You see the jamborees that are going on, the kind of celebrations and the kind of meetings that happen with thousands of people, with fascinating shamianas, with air-conditioned stuff and all that and everything. Do you think that comes with white money? Who told you that?
Nobody told me that.
And nobody can ask.
But this is one of the reasons the BJP cites for pushing for that one nation, one election, simultaneous elections. We're spending too much money on elections.
They don't need anything now, because the opposition will have no money. They can fight any number of elections.
But I wanted to ask you seriously that by not having a level playing field, by crippling the finances of other parties or opposition parties in particular, how has that made a difference to their campaigns? Like, for example, you said that when parties have more money, you can spend on choppers, you can spend on fancy shamianas, air conditioners.
Book all the choppers.
Right, exactly.
So the opposition
in terms of operational
correct.
capability during an election.
Advertisement spots.
Of course, ads.
Advertisement spots in cities. Choppers. 500 things. I mean, you can subvert the entire electoral process depending on how much money you have.
Are you disappointed that the Election Commission didn't take a strong stand on this at this point?
I'm disappointed with all institutions.
Well, you've been very blunt on that,
Yes,
even the judiciary.
Forget about just the Election Commission. What have institutions done for this country of late?
But is there...
Let me say another thing. Let's assume, the Supreme Court may hold against us, they may hold in our favor. But let's assume they hold in our favor. If they hold against us, according to me, everything is lost. And immediately after the hearing was over, within 2 days, they opened another scheme of electoral bonds.
Yeah.
And remember, the collection of money is in January. There are no elections in January ever.
But
so this has nothing to do with elections. Then it's January, then it's April, then it's July, then it's October.
Every quarter, yeah.
Right? And in between, they have made exceptions also. So the point that I am making is that we should now devise a system by which, and state funding is not the answer. Cash will be there. But I would say that even if the Supreme Court decides in my favor the point I was making, they've already enriched themselves.
By opening the scheme 2 days later.
To them, except that in the coming 24 elections, whatever they have earned, they won't be able to earn more. Otherwise, they are already enriched. There's nothing you can do about it.
Absolutely.
That's a very serious issue. In other words, you have used public money through various means. You have enriched yourself by calling it an electoral bond which has nothing to do with elections. You're the richest party in the world. And you're using that economic might, which translates into political might, and you're using the entire media system to do your bidding.
Can I ask you, though, to explain to people why it is important for us as citizens and voters to know where our parties are getting their money from? I often run into people who say, well, why should it matter? But it does matter.
No, it's
Transparency in
not
politics.
it is fundamental to democracy.
Exactly.
I mean, forget about why it should matter or why it should not matter. It is the fundamental of democracy that I must know who is being funded and by whom, so that I can find out what the quid pro quo is. Remember, this is also a law which protects the criminal, because if you do not disclose the name of the person who has donated, then you don't know what favor he has got. And under the law, if you give money for a favor, and that is to a public servant, you can be prosecuted under the Prevention of Corruption Act. So in a way, this law protects criminals, because it will never be disclosed. So I want the India Alliance to go public in a press conference, make a statement that if and when we come to power, the first thing we will do is to dismantle this whole process that has resulted in the enrichment of the BJP. And whichever corporate sector has done this, we will get to know their names, and whatever favor they are in, each one of them will be prosecuted.
But you realize the consequences of doing that.
The problem is
Yeah.
that many of the governments in the states, which are also with the opposition,
Yeah.
may also be
Yeah.
subjected to this. But if you want to clean the system, if you want our constitution to function and be a practicing democracy, then you have to do this. You cannot allow this kind of poison to enter into the veins of our political system.
Therefore, a lot of corporate India would not be happy if this scheme was scrapped and their donations were made public.
No, they'll do it in another way.
They'll find ways.
Of course, they'll do it in another way. Don't see. We are the Indian mind, the ingenuity of the Indian mind.
That I agree with you. We find a way out.
Cannot be matched.
One final question, Mr. Sibal. I know the hearing is finally over and it happened within 3 days, it took so long, but were you disappointed that it took this long for this matter to be heard?
I don't want to say anything. I think that when you talk of justice delayed being justice denied, what does it mean? If you don't take up an issue when the moment has arrived to take it up, and you take it after 5 years, what do you end up with? You end up with enriching the party and subverting democracy. And we all are responsible for that.
I think you said quite a bit in not saying anything. Mr. Sibal, thank you very much. And thank you for actually breaking your silence on an issue. Like you said, you never do speak on cases where you are arguing or have argued. So it's great that you did that today, because this is an issue that is very central and fundamental to our democracy. We've got general elections now coming up in the next few months. We do have a right to know as citizens where our political parties are being funded from. This is not a favor that parties are doing us. This is something that we actually do have a right to know. Thanks very much for watching this week. We'll see you again very soon.